This analysis video is for Jeremy. Uh, Jeremy, thanks for submitting your swing. And David, I'm sure you'll watch this as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think has changed between when you were hitting a little better and what's going on now, and then kind of paint a little picture as far as what I'd like to work on long term, and we can go back and forth on that. So I know that the transition has been one of your areas of focus, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the release, because I believe that a transition kind of loads what the brain wants to do during a release, not causes the body to compensate during a release. So I'm always, in my experience, I've found that training the release first and getting that really solid helps make training the transition that much easier. So as we look over here on the right, you can see that the change of direction is going to happen largely in this area here. So there's not a ton of foot to ground interaction, which is why you'll tend to see this shoulder start working away towards the target relatively quickly. So you'll see that it's kind of that lat and oblique area of the rib cage as opposed to any real drive from the feet and legs. Now I think that if you drove from the feet and legs, that would create some more body rotation and side bend, which would open the face even more, which would make it hard for you to find a way to square it with this a little bit more of that roll release style. So let's look at the release and then compare it to what you were doing and compare it to what I think really good ball strikers do. So as you get down, it looks like we've got a ton of lag and everything looks pretty good. But if we get it close to impact, you can see that there's very little shaft lean. And actually compared to where you were a bit ago, you can see that there's significantly less shaft lean. The other thing that is kind of important to note is that location of the right arm. So where you were coming through here, over on the left, you had your right arm working a little bit more across your body. This creates a little bit better what I call flat spot or path of the club through the ball. So what you'll see is over here on the right, because you don't have as much shaft lean, this right arm is a little bit more behind your body, and we'll be able to pick up one more kind of difference when we look at it a little bit further down the line. What you'll see is that the club, or the club head, works up off the ground relatively quickly, and that right arm never really gets fully extended until much later, kind of out in there. So if you just look at the path of the club, I like to see it staying very close to the ground through there, which requires shaft lean in order to be able to do it. But given the roll release, if you have too much shaft lean, you'd have very steep divots. So what we'll see over here when you're hitting the ball a little bit better, you had a little bit more shaft lean, the club stays lower to the ground longer, and that right arm really gets extended. So to the point where we can see that this is about the same kind of relative angle of the shaft, and you can see that the club head is much further away. So just as kind of a comparison, I know they're not exactly the same camera angle, but you can see about the relative, similar spacing as far as the club head to the edge of the screen there, and then you'll see that it works up and kind of misses that basket. If we had that basket here over on the right, I'm confident that that club head would be more into the basket, so staying a little bit lower and really brushing the ground better. Now one of the long-term focuses is as we get into this pass follow-through, you'll see that your upper body over on the right has a tendency to stay in more of its flexion. So you can see kind of the still rounded nature of the spine there. That I think that's going to be kind of the biggest area of focus for this off season, is trying to get a little bit more extension through the spine. That extension through the spine would cause you to hit it fat if you don't have more of the release like you had back here in September. So, and the interesting thing is, if I bring up some of your older swings and we look at that extension move. So again, not exactly the same camera angles, but you can see how the spine in this position is relatively straight, and as we go even further back in time, you'll see that that spine is actually bending back slightly. So it's just something that through your development you've gravitated more towards keeping that spine more flexed, and that has contributed to getting more of that roll release to basically avoid hitting it fat without going into extension. So now I want to address the little the transition move of the ruler up against your sleeve kind of imagery, and I'll show you where I think that is. It's more related to a lack of using the ground than it is kind of a true problem. So here's a guy I consult with, Charles Howell, and you can see that he's kind of got a similar look where his nose kind of slides along his sleeve. He's very much a lat pull upper body dominant player. Can get very streaky, can get very hot, but definitely has struggled with the longer clubs and half swings as well. Now, he does do a good job of getting that arm extension piece, and you'll see in that follow through a pretty good amount of extension through the spine there, because that extension through the spine is a bit shallower, which will allow you to not have to roll the release quite as much. You'll be able to kind of fully unhinge and let the club face kind of close a little bit easier if we can get into this extension position, a little bit more glute squeeze. So that's where I was mentioning in the email that I think that getting lower body activity through your exercise program is probably going to be a whole lot easier than trying to get it just through here. So it's a good little off-season project to work on that core engagement, to work on connecting what you're doing in the gym to trying to make this position here, or this movement pattern, that much more comfortable. So now, Jeremy, I know you commented that you were concerned that you weren't getting your hips square early enough. That looks like it's pretty good sequencing there, which is another reason why I think it's more of the release pattern. The lower body sequence is pretty good there anyway. I would like to see a little bit longer contribution from the upper body, because you can see that the gap in your shoulder kind of increasing there. So your arms are definitely starting to fire a little bit earlier than we'd like. But what you'll see from this down the line is, again, very little, the club starts working up relatively quickly. There's not that full unhinging and full arm extension piece. So if you look at the, and this would be what I think is kind of the long-term goal with the release, is to get a little bit better with this movement here, where if you look at the grip compared to the left forearm, now the left forearm is blocked by the right forearm, but if you look at the grip compared to the left forearm, you'll see that there's actually a very kind of quick rehinging. So the club starts working up almost like you're hinging a hammer instead of unhinging the hammer. I think that one of the trademarks of guys who are really good at both driving the ball and hitting those half shots is that that full unhinging. So you can see this is kind of more in line with where you guys were happier with your swing. If we take them both towards impact, towards delivery, you can see that your upper body is a little bit more rotated here, we can see a bit more of the chest, so that's going to put some of the bottom of the swing a little bit further behind the golf ball. Again, encouraging that a little bit more of that roll release. And then through the ball, you can see not a dramatic difference from this down the line view. Perhaps a little bit better of that unhinging and arm extension, because we know that from the face-on view it had a little bit more shaft lean. But overall, from the down the line, not a ton has changed. You did a better job of kind of keeping the club outside the hand, so that's a little bit less of the roll, which again would make sense with the fact that you're a little bit more flexed and don't quite have as much of the shaft lean. So that's why I was encouraging just for this weekend to try to get better turf contact and not worry too much about the technical details of it. But I'll include some drill videos to get you to work on a little bit better bracing through the ball. I think that's going to be one of your big off-season projects. And then tying that with a little bit better unhinging with the wrists. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help you work through this. But overall sequencing is looking better, but we can see that there are a couple reasons why you might be going through a little bit of a slump. You've got to be real careful with what you do in the gym. There's going to be lots of opinions out there, but I've seen classic strength training really ruin junior golfers pretty quickly. So just be real careful with how you're training, especially your upper body.